Okay, the Morgantown Traffic Commission meeting for this date, Wednesday, October 5th, 2022, will come to order. My name is Matthew Cross. I am chairman of the Traffic Commission. Begin with introductions. William?
William Blosser, Planning Commission. Chip Walmsley, by board.
Martin Dombrowski, 7th Ward.
Tony Tarantini.
Brennan Williams, 5th Ward.
Dave Harshbarger, City Council. Drew Gatlin, Staff Engineer for the City of Morgantown.
And representing First Ward is Frances Brownfield, who is absent, and Fifth Ward is Sharon Patrick. She told us she cannot make it tonight. And so let's go ahead and begin then. That is our introduction roll call.
Recorder.
What's that?
Recorder.
Recorder. Okay, we have a new process now, so do we just take volunteers for the recording position as we addressed? Anybody want to volunteer to record the actions for tonight?
I'll do it if I can borrow a pen from somebody.
There you go.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you,
You
Brennan.
are gaining a lot of IOUs from the other commissioners.
She can negotiate the salary increase at the beginning of the year, so we'll talk about that. Now, the minutes were just distributed. You all had a chance, if you want to take another minute to look over those. I'll await a motion to pass the minutes from September.
I make a motion that we approve.
Motion made by Brennan, second on that.
I second that.
Any discussion, edits, input?
Martin, do you think I adequately captured the things you talked about in your commissioner observations?
This page here, the first page?
Yeah,
Correct.
minutes.
September 7th minutes.
I took them, so if not, I don't know if you added to them, Drew?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, with my notes. And
Okay.
whatnot.
Very good.
Hold up, just let, I guess you're still reading. So
Okay.
I
No,
just
it's
want-
fine.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay, good to go then. So, all those in favor, say aye.
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 All right.
Any opposed?
Wait, yeah, I did not attach the attachment to the notes, so,
The bylaws?
no.
No,
So if you
is
see the Safe Streets for All grant application on the new business, substance,
Ah,
presentation,
right.
you'll also see attachment.
Uh-huh.
So, I guess I would be happy to add the attachment, and then send these minutes to the, to the, otherwise unchanged to the city clerk for posting if y'all are with that.
Okay, so hearing that, does anybody who was not at the meeting have any reservations about passing the minutes without overseeing the attachment? William?
I have no objection.
Okay. Well, if there's no objection, then the minutes will be passed as is. Our thanks to Mr. Austin for a presentation on the Safe Grants, Safe Streets for All grant application. He does very good work at the MPO along with Drew. We're making a lot of progress here in the city, and let's hope that comes through. They work countywide. We have the countywide Alta plan that we refer to from 2019, so we're putting a lot of effort into making our streets safer for everyone. So thanks to Bill Austin for that. And everyone at the MPO, Jing and all of those. Okay, so public comment. Young man, you here for a public comment?
No, I'm
Just observing?
yes.
Very good. All right, let's see, so no one else in the gallery right now, so we will proceed to the old business. the Traffic Commission bylaws that Drew just handed out. Looks like we're getting those formulated to go forward with the Traffic Commission. Thanks to Brennan for putting those together. We've been talking about these for the past couple of meetings. So let's hand it over to Drew. Do you have any points you want to bring attention to on the bylaws at this time?
Sure, I'll give you an update as
Okay.
to what I handed to you. So I accepted the changes that didn't seem to have any contention last time. And so you are not seeing those changes. They're just the only highlighted ones are new changes. So I went ahead and deleted the word secretary from this entirely in order to kind of be a little bit more explicit of just the city engineer's participation and the city engineer's, technical staff like myself and or administrative staff like Ms. Morgan, it being a little bit more fluid, and those sort of duties all being able to be carried out by one or more people as designated by the city engineer. So I don't know if y'all think that that's a reasonable way to approach that. So I got rid of that word secretary and just combined some of the expressed expectations of us as technical and administrative staff underneath kind of this combined role. So at least somebody has to be here from the engineering office, right? And that person would then be kind of the conduit to which you would, be interacting with the engineering office and being supported by the engineering office. So, or the office of the engineer. So yeah, I mean, I added. The keep recordings when appropriate and possible, right? So if we're out doing some type of pop-up event and it's really just not practicable to have a recording, then we wouldn't necessarily be violating the bylaws by not recording that. And then I also noted, added this fifth thing, perform other duties as requested by the commission, right? So you all do request things of the engineering department, and that's fine. And so this is just kind of describing that, and then again taking out that secretary and just kind of broadening it to admin and tech support. So on the Article 4, under quorum.
Sorry.
Yep.
Go back. Number 9.
Yep.
Actually, rewind up. Go to 8B. There's other
secretary.
references there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Did not do a Control F. Yeah. Yep. Cool. Excellent. Do you see any problem with me just kind of swapping those terms in general?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Martin. Yep, we still have that, attendance requirements. Yeah, and we are still, I guess, operating underneath the not strict reading of these words, but more the, I guess, do we want to have more, any notes on that? Or should we just keep it as is?
I thought we'd briefly discussed, like, Matt, were you not gonna reach out to?
Charlie Byer, yes, I was just going to mention that for the third
and
ward. My
see
apologies,
if,
Charlie.
just not showing up
yes.
because he no longer wants to be on, or maybe there's other reasons?
Yes, he did respond, and he said he did plan to attend tonight. He apologized. He's had a lot of family business to attend to, but he does intend to remain with the traffic commission, and he would be a valuable voice, experience with city council and so forth.
He, at least when he sent me an email, it looked like he intended to copy everybody, but it looked like it just came to me, but maybe BCC'd certain people. Anyway, he said specifically, Drew, Matt, and fellow commissioners, during the last several months, it has been difficult for me to attend meetings with unexpected out-of-town family obligations. Hopefully these situations appear to be easing up. I am planning on attending our November traffic commission.
I misread that. Thank you.
Thanks for your patience, Charlie. So,
All right, thank you for that clarification there.
but yeah, he did not note that he was going to be missing tonight's meeting or not. It was just vague, so.
Very good. So thank you for reminding us that, Tony. So looks like we have all wards filled except for the 4th ward for anyone out there in Evansdale area who would want to offer their services for traffic commission. We would appreciate that. So back to the discussion there with the attendance requirements. That would look adequate to me.
Perhaps
I think
We
it
could-
was a question of what we considered a bona fide emergency, of that definition.
it seemed like most of the things that were important to this commission were attempted to be addressed in B, but A and B are a little bit, they don't really work together that great. Perhaps we could change A to say, any member who who doesn't give prior notice, it's mostly these kind of unexplained and not previously notified absences that would potentially mess up, quorums or whatnot that we're really concerned with. We are also concerned with actual attendance, but I don't know.
I mean, I think prior notice is, it should be mandatory. If you don't come, you need to tell somebody you're not coming, right? You just don't show up. You don't do that in your normal life. Why would you do that here?
Right.
So, I think that would be reasonable to have that in there. If you can't come, you can't come. You don't have to write a novel on why, but it would be nice to let people know that you can't come.
Perhaps we could.
Well, the B is mainly just to get to the point whether we have a quorum or not, so it's for us to.
Yeah, it's not really necessarily about attendance.
Correct.
But perhaps there are some things here, right? So somebody could give prior notice and have lots of emergencies and miss, say, every single meeting in a year. And we'd be like, hey, listen, you should really just vacate your position and give it to somebody because your ward deserves to be represented, right?
Yep.
And we could say, 3 meetings, 6 meetings, whatever. Then we could also have the sort of, if you don't give prior notice, right, maybe you have 2 shots, right? Like twice and then we have to have a discussion or something, right? Where, yeah, something like that, right? So maybe we could do, I don't know, 4 meetings.
Yeah, that's what I was seeing here. 30% of all meetings would be dependent at the end of the year. Look up to see how many meetings we have. It might not be 12 within a year.
Right. I do think that we're gonna hopefully continue to have these monthly meetings rather than the random ones. Just. to
And
give
I
the
was,
public-
so that would be if say we have 12, then that would be 1/3, 4 meetings. I was reading in the Ped Board guidelines as well. We state that all board members are attend at least 4 meetings per year, which I thought was pretty plain and simple. But I don't know if we would want to apply that here or not. I'm okay with the 30%.
it might be a simpler way. Instead of focusing on the ones you miss, you have to attend X amount of meetings.
Mhm. And so it's a calendar year, kind of back calculated versus a rolling year, right? So, yeah, I don't know. Anybody have thoughts on that?
Well, if it's just regular meetings, we can assume that it's set at the beginning of the year that there's gonna be 12 regular meetings.
Mhm.
I mean, it would be easier just to keep track of having to do math. Just say, you know, either how many meetings you can't miss, or you have to require at least a certain amount. That would make that easier. I think the point here is that if there's 30% of 12 meetings that are gonna be on the calendar, if there's an additional meeting, emergency meeting, or whatever we call it in the bylaws, that it could bump us up to an extra one, that if you missed one, or an extra one with the special meeting, that the 30% could actually extend how many actual meetings you miss. But the percentage is a little wonky, so maybe it is that we just say you can't miss X amount of regular scheduled meetings a year.
Yeah, for some reason, I'm thinking about, like, if you did it the other way, right? If people were, so you're counting up instead of counting down, right? If people were having an issue with attendance, right, then we could call a special meeting just to make sure that they would have another chance to show up and get their, you know, fourth or fifth meeting or whatever to attend. Yeah, I don't know. I really am not leaning towards any one thing or another. This is really, in my opinion, y'all's to decide, and
I think whatever's simplest in a case like Charlie Reiner, you know, you call and you find out if he's still really interested. Sounds like he is. I mean, most people are gonna say no if they've not made the meeting, so whatever's the simplest to track would be my suggestion.
Well, let me repeat, the guidelines from the PED board were designed by Ron Eck, who was Traffic Commission chairman at the time, and he just said must attend 4 meetings per year. And that probably applied to Traffic Commission at the time in 2007 as well. Maybe not. But would that just be the simplest thing? That way we wouldn't have to wait till the end of the year to tabulate the attendance. If somebody's continually absent for 6 meetings, 7 meetings, 8 meetings, 9 meetings, maybe they can attend the last 4 of the month.
I mean, I think it's actually easier to do the rolling calculation month to
Okay.
month. We can just have a little spreadsheet essentially of the commissioners if we did want to actually count things. I think it's not that difficult, and it just, you know, bumps up, and that way, yeah.
I'm fine with that. And would that be necessarily tabulated by Secretary Morgan, attendance? Required?
That, you know, the minutes would show the roll call.
Right.
And yes, we would notify.
Very good.
Perhaps that would be something we could just add here, you know, so the engineer and or their designee will, you know, track attendance and notify, you know, the chairperson.
Okay.
Of anything, and then give the chairperson the, kind of the role of, I guess, enforcing that, you know?
Right, the administration would
Mhm.
monitor that. So, as you stated, with the rolling meetings then, so the direct language on that would be, what do you suggest, Drew?
I'd be happy to sit here in silence for a little bit while I write out that language, but I'm pretty bad at thinking on my feet for writing it.
Well, how about for you, since you've been kind of keeping track of these changes, the broad language to include under the new updated city engineer under Article 2, Item 6, to add the city engineer to the effect of being responsible for keep tracking attendance.
Yep, absolutely, yeah, tracking and then communicating, right, attendance. And then the chairperson, perhaps underneath, right, their duties is to, you know, kind of receive communications from the engineer and then make determinations about sort of if attendance problems are, or attendance is an issue with any particular commissioner.
Yes, I'll be glad to, well, the chairperson, as I am it currently, I'll be glad to reach out to any of the commissioners. And I think that would not be a problem in the future.
We could, I mean, if we just want to even just delete number 8, right, completely, right, and not have any necessarily specific number, right, it's just kind of this kind of check-in thing, the engineering office and the commissioner, or the chairperson, as they're setting the agenda, they review the attendance of everybody. They kind of are discussing if there's problems, and then determining whether or not perhaps to put that on the agenda for the next, month, whether or not the commission would want to vote somebody off the island. Right?
I think we'd have to have some kind of rules of procedure before we could just kind of decide something's a problem. Give us some kind of guidance of what constitutes a problem. But I feel pretty strongly like missing 3 consecutive regular meetings, but for sickness or bona fide reason is okay, and 8B is fine too. It's just to update so that we know we have a quorum.
All right.
So you have that language there, Brennan, for the notes?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead. I don't know if you need a minute on that. I will say that, just let me ask the body here on 8B, as for the quorum. Quorum stated in our PED board was 50% of all voting members to pass any action. In my understanding, this body has 10 voting members, am I correct?
If you can go to the Article 4.
Oh, we jumped down, huh?
Next, back to the page. Back to the page. Yep. Turn it over. Nope. There you go.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right.
Okay.
So yeah, conflict of interest is the same. Article 4, meetings, everything. I added an apostrophe after 24 hours, right? Up in meeting time and place, and then under 3, quorum, I clarified the email that you had followed up on, Commissioner Harshbarger, Dave. Yeah, you talked with Ryan,
and Christine, and they said that because we're an advisory body, that we could still meet, but it's up to us. So if we want to say we would want a quorum to conduct business, the standard protocol is a majority of filled seats. So we might have 12 seats, but 10 are filled. We'd need 6 if that's what we want to do, and that would be my recommendation. That's what I've done on other boards.
So you're saying the majority of members present? at a meeting?
No, no.
Majority of members serving.
Of voting members?
No, his email said very specifically, not filled seats. It said seats. So a quorum, the standard is, a quorum is a majority of possible seats, whether or not they're filled. And so if you had only 7 seats filled, right, you would still need 6 people to show up in order to conduct business because we have 11 seats right now. At least that's the way that I read his email, and your email to us, right?
Do we have 11? I just want to clarify that. I think it's 10, right?
It's 11.
Can we go down that line?
Just look at the agenda, right?
How many filled do we have, I guess? Is the
We have
question.
10, well, no, pardon me, we have, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we have 11 total seats, and we have 10 filled.
10 filled, so we only have 10 voting members, correct?
We have 10 voting members, yes.
Okay.
And so the quorum is defined as the majority of 11,
Mhm.
which is 6.
Mhm.
And then your voting majority is just whoever shows up that is a voting member, a majority of those people that show up, right?
Okay, so it is a majority of the members present at a meeting
To vote, not to conduct the meeting.
to pass action, right?
To be allowed to have a vote, you have to have 6 members,
Mhm. All right.
as this is written. And then in order to pass a vote, you have to have, I guess, is 50% considered a majority? You have to have 4 votes.
Mhm. Okay.
So, yeah, versus, and this is, I guess because 11 is a funny number, right? It would be the same thing, right? If, right now, if we defined a majority as just the seats that were filled, we have 10, and so a majority of 10 is 6, which is the same as a majority of 11, which is 6. Right, but the problem would be is if we don't have, and we're only recently actually really filled, right, with members. We had a lot of vacancies at one point. And so, I think my original caution to you all was trying to encourage this body to shift its focus to filling vacancies if it gets to a point where it cannot meet the traditional definition of a quorum, which is a majority of seats that are available. So if you only have 5 people on the commission, then you actually can't even do business.
Mhm.
And Ryan's comment was because we're an advisory board, we could still do that if we wanted to, but if we wanted to define this tightly, as Drew has described, we could define it tightly and say, well, we're not gonna conduct business because we don't have a quorum. Or we could say, we could still provide advice to council, but just say under the preface, this was without a quorum present. It probably makes sense to stick to a quorum for providing input, unless we are not able to fill enough seats and that we are regularly not having a quorum and there's something that's important to provide our advice to council.
Yeah, I mean, now that we have, a lot of filled seats and whatnot, it's not much of a concern, I don't think. It's not as much of a concern, and the commission can always change the bylaws, right, at any meeting, with notice or whatever, right? So, if it becomes a problem, if you all have 6 members and you really want to think about not losing your ability to vote on or conduct business, right, then maybe change it then, right?
Yeah, no,
Before you lose them.
I'm good with doing it the way you've described, where it's the majority of the seats available,
Right.
which are, you said 11, right?
6, yeah, there's 11 available right now.
So we would need 6 to conduct business.
Yep.
Yes, I'm good with that. Just wanted to clarify the conversation on that, so, thank you. Anybody else? Opinion on it? Okay, so we have defined quorum then for the traffic commission.
All right. And then the recorder. So Martin, I agreed, right, I think we all agreed that the minutes were pretty light, and that it was helpful in the past to have summaries of things, right? Summaries of right, of deliberation on votes and outcomes, as well as summaries of commissioner comments. And then I kept the notable meeting occurrences as requested by commissioners. So just as we're moving through these meetings, if you want something to be on the minutes, tell the recorder. Just make sure, they may end up recording it, or I may end up remembering it and then including it later on, as I did with yours. Your minutes were pretty light, and so I tried to flesh them out a little bit to reflect a little bit more about what the meeting was about. So I don't know about if this level of minutes was acceptable to you all. I mean, last meeting was a little rough. I certainly have some apologies to make about that, and but I thought that I was trying to kind of capture at least a little bit about what was going on. Yeah, so that's the only major changes to these bylaws that we made that I'm bringing to you now.
Anybody else have any other input on bylaws that might be necessary for the traffic commission, future traffic commissioners to abide by? Might provide some clarity for you?
Just one observation. On those occasions when the meetings are recorded, can you dispense with the secretary altogether?
I don't know. I think that I don't think that the Open Meetings Act allows a simple recording to serve as the minutes, but I'm not sure. That would be interesting, but it would be pretty inaccessible, right? And so
It's posted on the web and a copy given to the library.
yes, yes. But for people that don't know how to, I don't know, right, it's like distilled minutes versus a 2 to 3 hour long video, potentially, right? The distilled minutes allow for easier, faster consumption. They're not as much of a burden to consume for people that are trying to kind of keep tabs on what the commission is doing, right? And so it's, I think that's probably why the Sunshine Law, and I'm not 100% about this, but I think it does not allow the recording to serve as the minutes itself, the recording itself to serve as the minutes.
And that was part of the discussion we had a meeting or two ago. I think you were not in attendance, William, where we were sort of taking the impetus off of Secretary Morgan. She traditionally had to sit and listen to those recorded meetings and type all of the language that went in that she thought necessary. But at this point, we're just recording the action items, pretty much, to move forward. That goes to City Council in time, if that is the appropriate target. So this just sort of streamlines the process, takes a little of the burden off Secretary Morgan. And as you say, anyone who wants to refer to what happened in any traffic commission meeting, if it is recorded, they have access to it on the government site.
Now, I will reiterate that with the changes that I made this time under the recorder, it is not just votes, right? It is explicitly, right, like a summary of the deliberation on those votes, which is ideally, right, with commissions that follow Robert's Rules of Order, there are, you kind of know what votes are going to be in front of you, and we're not following Robert's Rules of Order anymore, right? That was one of the things we discussed last time. But you have your clear agenda, you have your items, you know what you're about to vote on. You don't really discuss it until somebody moves to vote on it. And then, after a second, then you begin discussing. And that's when a secretary, a traditional secretary or recorder would know to begin really paying attention and starting to write down the deliberation. But this body, for maybe its entire existence, has never been able to really follow that strict of procedure. And so after the fact, rather than, without a verbatim transcript of the meeting, it is difficult to know when you should start paying attention. And so, the meetings would take sometimes an entire day to transcribe, right? And then to distill even, right? Pausing and going back and forth and trying to understand us kind of yelling at each other and all that stuff, right? So we could try to be better about the way that we conduct business and discuss and make it a little bit more legible and whatnot for the recorder and for people that are listening and all of that, or attempt to just do it ad hoc as usual. I think with an intention to do a little bit of both and kind of somewhere in the middle where we are noting to the recorder, please, write this down, make sure that's in the minutes.
And those recordings would be upon whoever is recording them and their abilities and their selection of what to record. So far, we've been putting the burden on Brennan mostly. Anybody else at this point might want to consider, if they want to serve and role as recorder. I would hate to think that it's going to be Brennan every time because he has, the heart to volunteer for it. So, I guess we'll just have to see how that goes. Is that how it's going to happen?
No.
Okay. Thank you for saying that.
No, it's gotta rotate,
Uh,
I did it, Brent's done it, it just needs to rotate.
Okay. Well, what if nobody volunteers?
We will then,
Voluntold,
yeah.
What's that?
voluntold, it's gotta rotate.
Okay. All right.
For sure.
I don't know if that needs to be strict, so voluntold, so would I be the one to designate the note taker if nobody volunteers?
Yep,
Okay. Does that need to be stated in the bylaws?
no, it's
Okay.
just
All
something we
right.
have to do.
So, I will be sure to put a ruler in my bag. Anybody out of hand? All right. We'll take care of it. All right, so, thank you for the input on that, William, about the bylaws. Have we completed this discussion on the bylaws? Is there anything that we're missing? Are we-
Hopefully, we'll have a final version next meeting, vote on that, the
Mhm.
goal. All
Right.
right.
Okay, and that may, at that point, do we want to give some time for Mr. Byer and Ms. Patrick to offer some input on it? It will still be open on the table to some input?
If they are present at the meeting when we are voting on it, then of course, absolutely.
Good.
It's never done until it's
Okay.
voted on, right?
So I think this is a good way to move forward. If we have problems with it, we can address them at a later date. I think this gives us a pretty good vehicle to pursue our mission with. So thank you, Brennan, again for putting this together. I think it's very helpful in order for us to tighten up the ship a little bit. So are we finished with the discussion on the bylaws? Okay. Let's see, moving into new business, let me just state quickly that I like the bylaws and how we're going to proceed. Next in line, I would like to put on the agenda for next time is to go over the procedural guidelines about how we're going to talk about what we're talking about. If you all remember, we have an email that Drew sent out about the four stages of that. So check over your old emails and look for that on the agenda. Next time, we can give that some discussion. All right, new business, pay board applicants, as designated in the pedestrian safety board guidelines, all applicants need to be approved by the traffic commission. We've been very short on membership with the Pedestrian Safety Board for a long time, so we're excited that Bill Reeker Nash, our longtime member and one of our founders, has gone out and done some recruitment. And he was able to gather a couple of members in our seats. We do not have representation by ward on the Pedestrian Safety Board. It just states 10 members from the city and various other entities that should be represented, which are not filled at this point, but we're working on it. So we have 2 new applicants for you to consider and approve if you would. I guess we will just take them one by one. Any question on the appointment process for the Ped Board?
Traffic Commission appoints to the Ped Board?
Traffic Commission approves the appointments to the
Gotcha.
Ped Board, yeah. So
Thank you.
since Ped Board is advisory to the Traffic Commission, that
So-
is what's stated in the guidelines.
Right. The bike board guidelines said something similar, and the
Mhm.
traffic commission didn't meet for about 2 years, and it prevented movement on the bike board. And so the bike board adjusted its guidelines and removed the requirement for the traffic commission to approve it. It's strange to me that a subsidiary body would make it self-deferential in that sense. Certainly the traffic commission bylaws and the ordinance and whatnot that creates the traffic commission doesn't say anything about it needing to approve the members of any of its subsidiary advisory boards and whatnot, but just FYI, if you all wanted to tell the Ped Board to be more autonomous and not to rely on you all to approve these people that you've never met, that you don't know anything about, that there is no process for you to really know anything about or get to any information about, I think that might be a step in the right bureaucratic direction.
I would agree, as a subsidiary board, that they should have the power to vote and elect their own board. You know, in council, we interview every applicant for every board, but not the ped and bike because it falls sort of under this board, so I think that makes sense.
Thank you for that input, Dave, from City Council, and Drew, good point too. I was going to have to sit here and describe these individuals to you, which I didn't want to do. They're certainly qualified, and we appreciate their efforts. So is that how we want to proceed with the, would we want to strike that from the guidelines of the Ped Board at this point? Is that necessary?
That would be my suggestion, that, you know, as a courtesy, you just bring forward who these new people are and just inform the traffic commission that it's been approved by the Ped Board.
Okay, so would that be the final say on this if we go ahead and take a vote? I will just inform, well, Drew knows of it, so we can strike that from the current guidelines as logged down in 2007, which are pretty old, but they are existing, and we can just strike that. So if that's a way we want to proceed with that,
Just one question, would it be helpful for us just to go ahead and vote to approve them, just in case there's not any kind of issue to delay them getting onto the Ped Board?
Probably.
yeah, since it's on the agenda, we should go and do that. Thank you for that. And then, good point. So, with that said, let me just state that the first name would be Emily Jewson. She lives over in 7th Ward. She attended our Ped Board meeting the last time by video, was enthusiastic. I followed up with an email asking her if she would like to proceed and be a member of the Ped Board. She said yes. So we appreciate that. So do I have a motion to approve Emily Jewson?
I so move.
Chip on, please, second. Tony? All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you, gentlemen. Next one is Lori Abilso. She is the wife of Christian Abilso, who has done great work with the Ped Board back in the day. He was one that helped formulate the regional pedestrian safety plan from 2007. Glad to have her on board. She's an avid walker, biker in town. She's been highlighted on some of the promotions downtown with the kayaking and the rail trail. So we appreciate, you know, good families coming in here. And she lives over in the 1st Ward, and she already has some direct input to the Ped Board on an issue over on Dorsey Avenue. So good to have her on board. Motion to forward for Lori Abilso.
Move to move forward.
second, Martin. All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. Glad to have them on board. So the PED Board will do what we can to provide information to the Traffic Commission and ultimately on to City Council as to what we would approve of regarding engineering, education, and enforcement when it comes to traffic safety in the city of Morgantown. So thank you for that.
Chair, if you need a motion, I would move that in the future, the pedestrian board can appoint their own board appointments by majority vote, and as a courtesy, let the traffic commission know who they are.
Okay, you got that wording done, Brennan?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, sir. Motion is forwarded. Second on that? Martin? Any further discussion?
Would you want to, because, right, so the next item here, regular meeting schedule change, right? It's kind of implied that you're going to approve their meeting schedule change. These are all things that, right, is kind of them acting and kind of slightly modifying their bylaws or their, you know, their existence. Do you just want to give them autonomy to exist as they please in general? Or do you want to limit this autonomy to just appointing the members?
No, that's a
and all
good
that?
point. I mean, unless you disagree, Matt, I think that having the board, PED board act independently in reporting into the traffic commission is appropriate, without us overseeing any, creating any bureaucracy that's unneeded.
Actually, a good point. At the time that Mr. Eck formulated these, the PED Board did not have a voting role on the Traffic Commission. Now that the PED Board and Bike Board have been recognized, I would agree with that. So, good point there, Dave. So, is that a motion to,
Expand the voting capacity for really any issues that Drew sort of mentioned to be handled within a majority rules within the PED board that can then be communicated to the traffic commission.
okay, Brennan, you got some wording on that?
One more time, please.
That the PED board can act autonomously and or independently in terms of enacting rules,
Of its own business and
yes,
procedures.
of its own business by majority vote, and
And membership as well, yeah.
yeah, it would include board members and anything really, and then just letting the traffic commission know the outcomes of that.
Perfect.
All right.
Okay, so I'll be sure to note any official action with the PED Board that needs to come to the Traffic Commission as always. So, that
Do
wording.
you need a second on that one?
Sure. Okay, very good. Thank you, Brandon.
Mhm.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? All right. PED Board is free to roam, so we will roam. Thank you for that, gentlemen. And again, we'll do what we can to keep everything in order, everything safe. And people engaged in our traffic system. That's a big part of the education process. And on that note, I will add that Mr. Gatton informed me that the WV will have a safety walk like they do every year. And the invitation went out, and so we will, again, try to engage the WVU student body. I might actually present to them maybe later this month or next month. The winter months are coming up. Now that COVID is passing somewhat, we can try to get the students, engaged in thinking about pedestrian education and safety and activity. Dave had mentioned that he might participate at this point. I guess everyone got the email on that, about the opportunity?
Next Tuesday, is that right?
Yep.
So thank you for forwarding that, Drew. And that'll wrap it up for new business number 1 with the Pedestrian Safety Board. Let's move on to new business number 2, draft of the.
Just FYI, they've changed their meeting date to the fourth Monday, instead of the very first Monday, or second Monday of every month.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Who's that, I'm sorry?
The PED board.
Oh, okay.
So notoriously, we always had a problem with, we met after Traffic Commission had discussion. PED Board would not have a chance for input, but this schedule change allows us to discuss items and possibly provide advisory to the Traffic Commission in due time, so. And thank you for Drew for, pointing out it would be the fourth Monday, not the last Monday. Those interesting observations with the scheduling on that, so that works out really well. PED board members were enthusiastic about that. Seems to be working efficiently immediately, so.
Yep. And they did have 2 meetings in September.
Mhm.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, so new business number 2, we did speak at the PED board about the draft of pedestrian facilities, the sidewalk investment plan review. We liked and approved what Mr. Gatlin had to say about his proposals, so Drew, you want to take it over?
Sure. I do wish that we were meeting virtually today because rolling around the map while you're all looking at your computer screens is a lot easier than meeting in any of these particular rooms. It tends to be difficult. So anyhow, I guess a summary of what occurred at the PED board was, so over the past while, City Council requested that city administration come to them soon at some point with a plan for improving sidewalks. It was relatively vague, but the implication was a substantial sort of proposal in terms of dollars and scope for a yearly recurring plan to enact at the very least, the 2010 pedestrian safety plan and the reflected components of that plan in the 2019 Alta MMMPO regional bike ped plan. And we were first going to have something ready for City Council in, I believe, July, but that was told to me in the very beginning of June, and that was not really feasible. And so we have been getting stuff together, and I sent to you all over email and then printed you out a couple of these copies here. Some lists of things. The email that I sent, I think, distills it a little bit better. And so I'm going to read that for the benefit of the people listening here. So essentially, right, so we are bringing this to you all. This is the second body to review kind of the thought process behind this. At the fourth Monday Pedestrian Safety Board meeting, I did not have an explicit list that was distilled from the 2019 plan. I noted a lot of inconsistencies with the plan and sort of data gaps, recommendation gaps in the plan. So what I proposed to the PED board was that we remember that a lot of these projects need design, and so for any particular plan, we should make sure that a substantial portion of those funds goes towards design of future projects. And the PED board agreed that could be up to 25% of the monies each year. I also noted, because of the inconsistencies with the recommendations in the PED plan, that and I'm not reading, sorry, Tony, just yet. With the inconsistencies of the Alta plan, that we should spend potentially up to a couple $100,000, essentially reanalyzing our existing conditions in terms of the sidewalks in Morgantown, and that plan was a great plan. It was definitely regional in nature, though, and so I don't think that this is necessarily inappropriate to do. The plan is also aging already. It's already about 4 years old, and the data sets that it relied on for existing sidewalk data dated somewhat back to the 2010. So yeah, so yeah, the PED board then agreed, spending upwards of potentially 25% of, if you had a $1 million a year plan, on vetting the projects and then doing a detailed sort of analysis, right? So the takeaways are from this. We're planning to present to the October City Council of the Whole meeting. The PED board has committed to showing up to that meeting. I believe as many of the members as could be, as can show up, and to lend their support to the plan, to City Council. I recommend, or certainly I would invite you all to show up to that final presentation of this. After tonight, we're going to be talking with various neighborhood association meetings, if possible, or at least reaching out to them to try to get some feedback on some of the specific projects that we're looking to bring forward. Big takeaway, sidewalks are expensive. Our costs have more than doubled over a 1 year period with concrete sidewalks, going from about $100 a linear foot to over $200 a linear foot for a standard sidewalk. So that's unfortunate, but it's still a good investment. And so after the PED board, I went and started to really, they said with the rest of the money we should build sidewalks. And other strategic investments, right? Sidewalks don't necessarily have to look traditional in order to qualify for this type of investment. Side paths would be appropriate in certain areas where we have maybe limited rights of way, and certainly combined infrastructure is not a bad thing either for bike ped stuff. Crossings, of course, are also good. Yeah, so in general, the plan that was inconsistent and had lots of data gaps. Even with that, and a lot of projects that were to be determined in terms of its actual dollar amount, totaled in excess of $100 million for the region. So that's huge. If you boil that down to just within our city boundaries, we're looking at $51 million, and that's city boundaries as defined in 2018 or so, and city boundaries have certainly changed since then. And if you continue boiling it down, to just pedestrian projects or projects that are at least inclusive of pedestrians, so get rid of the bike lanes, get rid of the shared lane markings, get rid of the climbing lanes and all that kind of stuff, we're still sitting over $30 million in our municipal boundaries, and that does not include any projects on state-owned roads. So with our current funding of paving projects in general, where we do sidewalks occasionally at $1.8 million a year, basically we're in over our heads. We need a levy, but probably not going to pass a levy. So the takeaway is that we have enough projects to consume as much funding as is available, right, for the foreseeable future, right? So as whatever money you want to throw the engineer department's way, we will spend it and we will build sidewalks. There are a massive backlog of projects. I said that $1 million a year would be a good start, but our current estimates put the backlog in excess of $30 million. And we could totally easily consume all the remaining ARPA funds if we were directed to, in any timeline that we were directed to spend them. Design money must be allocated, right, with any regular funding plan at 25% per year. And yeah, and so on and so forth. So Yeah, the attached summary, if you look at it, it says a little bit of what I just said, right? And it talks about the kind of the priorities of construction projects, right? So closing gaps is the highest priority at the beginning, rather than replacing existing sidewalks unless they are particularly hazardous or present a gap themselves. We talked about engaging public works for some of those more straightforward sidewalk replacements. That might be a good way to build expertise within the Public Works Department to form sidewalk crews that may be more cost effective, but rather than having them build brand new sidewalks where there aren't any sidewalks, to start out, kind of doing some more of just the remove, replace. Curb ramp upgrades should not be taken out of any additional funding. Curb ramp upgrades right now are funded through the $1.8 million typical paving project, and they should remain that. Curb ramp upgrades are required to do any paving activities, and so those should just remain there. What's up?
Does that also include like moving telephone poles out of the existing sidewalk so that it's a sidewalk and not a barrier?
Does what include?
Much.
You said does that include or does what
Does
include?
the plan include, when you're looking at doing a sidewalk and there's a telephone pole, it's dead center of the sidewalk.
Yep.
I've seen these bump outs that are just, could it be just, I don't know what it involves to lift the telephone pole and drop it and then do a nice clean sidewalk. Is that included in the design?
We certainly look at obstructions for anything that we're doing, and we attempt to remove them when possible or build around them when we need to. Yes, absolutely. I don't recall seeing any recommendations in the Alta plan saying this particular sidewalk, say for example the sidewalks on University between 3rd Street and 8th Street, right? The plan called for nothing there at all. No replacement, no widening, no removal of obstructions, no nothing. And so that's part of my issue with the 2019 Alta plan, right? Is yes, we have an issue with obstructions that make the effective width of certain sidewalks almost unusable, even by regular bodied people, right? So yes, I certainly, in my $1 billion plan that I have in my mind, right, I would address all of those. But the projects that I have on this list right now, none of them are focused on moving telephone poles out of the middle of sidewalks. And so, yes, with the closing of gaps being the highest priority at the very beginning, by definition, even though there is a telephone pole in the middle of this sidewalk, that wouldn't necessarily be considered a strict gap. There's still an existing facility there. It's underserved. It's not great. It's inaccessible, but it would not be the highest priority at the very beginning, as defined by this current plan. But I promise that I am not ever intending to build sidewalks and, with utility poles, Junior, unfortunately, notwithstanding,
Yeah, thank you for that point. We build all these ADA ramps, and then you'll see a telephone pole. A person with a wheelchair cannot navigate that whatsoever. Quick question about we were hoping to get the infrastructure buried on the mile ground. Have you seen the sidewalks and the telephone pole location on that, Chip? Is that in place?
Yeah, I mean, the sidewalks, they're still trying to get the communication lines. I think most of the power lines are moved, but the sidewalks down past the Jeep dealership, and they're doing prep. They're having to build some retaining walls in front of like the paw prints and some of those places because the roadway surface is a little bit lower. and they're getting those in place. So, and the poles all seem to be outside the sidewalks because they got the sidewalks done. Once they get the curbing and the gutter pans in, then they blow the sidewalks through there, and the poles are off to the sides.
Yep.
So,
Good, glad to hear it.
sidewalks aren't as wide as we'd like them to be, but the poles
They're
are
at
still
least-
off to the side.
I mean, I think they meet PROAGs.
Yeah.
PROAG is a minimum of 4 feet wide, yeah.
And there's actually people walking. I saw people from the apartments down by the airport walking on them. And I
Right.
saw one lady that evidently parked her car at the school after hours and was walking her dogs. I think she just was nibby and wanted to see what was happening, but she walked her dogs all the way down to the Jeep dealership and back. So,
Nice.
yeah,
Glad to hear
it's
you.
just
So-
kind of cool. The Field of Dreams, they build it and they will
Nice.
come. So,
Yeah, right. Thanks to the DOH for, including that in the project. So I know it's a lot of money, as Drew said, but, people need to walk.
Yeah, so I forget where I was, but yeah, Martin, utility poles are the bane of my existence for sure, when it comes to accessibility and sidewalks. This list that I had provided, do you have a question before I go through the list?
It's a little out, but regarding the University Avenue, as you stated, 2014, Stantec did a University Avenue corridor study. Were there any modifications on sidewalk in that plan? I don't recall. Are you familiar with that, or I should go back and look at it?
Well, certainly. I mean, I think the University Avenue Complete Street Study that the MPO commissioned called for total reconstruction of University Avenue,
Yeah.
widening, new
Right.
sidewalks, bike
Mhm.
lanes, da 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 da, and a lot has happened between now and then. But for some reason, those recommendations just disappeared from.
I wondered if they made it into the Ulta plan. I should know that, but I kind of fell out from between 2014 and 2019. I'll go back and check my records on that.
Mhm.
Because they had some good things to say back then in 2014. I liked it.
Mhm.
Drew, just a question on the costs you're tossing around. Does the Public Works, you'd mentioned having them maybe do some of the sidewalks. Are you thinking that normally that would all be contracted out? And for a business or homeowner that has the property adjacent in front, are we thinking of enforcing, I think what are laws on the book about their percent of amount or full amount that they're responsible for fixing, upgrading the sidewalks that are deemed needed? Is that part of this?
There is no specific recommendation that I am bringing to council about that. I was told more or less to bring you all $1 million per year capital improvement plan.
Okay.
And to me, the current ordinance on the books ascribing responsibility for sidewalks to adjoining property owners is a giant elephant in the room.
Yep.
And with every new sidewalk that we build, we are eroding our legal ability to enforce that ordinance. However, Mr. Preet has already eroded that legally in case law very effectively. So, yeah.
Just so I understand what you said, when the city puts a sidewalk in front of somebody's house, then that owner is responsible for that sidewalk. Is it shoveling snow, or if a truck runs it over and it crumbles, they're responsible for?
Theoretically.
That's what I thought you meant.
Right now, we
It's not been
could
enforced.
just, and we have, but as it's written in Morgantown, as with many thousands of other communities, we could send every single property owner a letter and say you have 30 days to build sidewalks in front of your house. And if you don't, then we could put a lien on your property and do it for you. That's the current ordinance. That's the current paradigm. And that's why I think the argument for a levy is very clear, right? And that nobody should have any problem politically passing a levy when right now I could threaten you with a $5,000 to $20,000 surprise 30-day payment, right? Any property owner, right? And if you're a big property owner that owns a lot of properties, then all of a sudden you've got $1 million worth of sidewalks that you got to build, right? In 30 days, legally. Of course, the city would never do that. Somebody would burn down City Hall, and then they'd come down and burn down courthouse, you know. But we have enforced this through certified mail when we pave streets. We tend to do inventories of those streets and the conditions of the sidewalks, and we will sometimes send letters to the adjoining property owner saying your sidewalk's in bad condition, please replace it, you know, or we will do it, you know, for you and put a lien on your property. And so some of the things that the Traffic Commission discussed in December, right, of last year or 2 years ago, I forget, at this point, was, I guess it was last year, right, changing some of these ordinances to provide for the ability to have a sidewalk cost sharing program where maybe we would prioritize sidewalks based on some undetermined and undefined method of their importance, generally related to, are they on a network of sidewalks, right, or and will they be used a lot, right, and those are going to be more important, and so then therefore the city will kick in more percentage versus maybe one that will not be used, or is it in a place that is has equity concerns, right? Like a census block that's particularly poor, right? We might kick in just by default more for that particular parcel. It's a strange thing, right? And it's totally undefined, and we don't have a policy or anything in place, and that's not put in here.
You know, as a suggestion, if there were any model cities our size that did something like that, and we've had a discussion, I can't even remember now the city, but not far from here, where the city pays for it all, and there's not a cost share. And of course that requires a lot of money, and you have the levy or the tax base or whatever to do it. But, you know, especially as we kind of move post-COVID and construction costs are so much higher, you know, what model might look right to consider, in the idea that it's a connector street to a school, a park, a fabric, a network getting from neighborhood A to B to C to downtown, et cetera, in higher priority, you know, all makes sense. Taking maybe what's been done before with the PED board, I don't know if it was 10, 15 years ago, with something that was done similar in terms of prioritizing and using that at least as a baseline.
CNS connecting network sidewalks and then
Neighborhood access sidewalks, those were two of the genres that we looked at by priority, as you say, with schools as well.
But that, you know, for example, at the committee of the whole, that could just be an idea that's thrown out there without a specific action, but just, you know, here are the sidewalks we're looking at, prioritizing the cost. Here's some ideas on how we might look to fund that. Here's how another city might be doing it. And then, you know, just leave it at that.
Yep. I mean, if you want to read the last portion of the 2019 Alta
Yeah,
plan,
yeah.
it's got a very nice summary of recommendations regarding funding.
Yeah.
Top one is a levy, right? It's a lot easier to stomach paying $50 to maybe $100 a year than it is $8,000 to $20,000 some random time,
Yep.
right? I mean, that takes you 50 years to pay off, right? Like, it's, yeah. So I really, you know, other ways, right? Sales taxes, right? ARPA funds, right? We've got $5.6 million, I think, sitting unallocated at this point. We have the user fee, right? Certainly could devote more of the existing user fee. We could add $1 to the user fee. We remain the lowest user fee in the state. However, the user fee has been on the chopping block and is likely going to disappear as a revenue generating mechanism for cities in West Virginia.
It's a threat. It's a threat.
It's
Wow.
probably going to disappear.
The user fee?
Oh yeah. It is in the crosshairs of the state legislature every year. And now it's going to be, we'll see. Even sales taxes, right? Even all the home rule stuff, right? I mean, it's all been on the chopping block for a long time, and Morgantown has only recently even taken advantage of those options.
It just real quickly, most counties in West Virginia don't have a city over 10,000 people. And so those legislatures are appealing to a county base. In those counties, you know, like, why do I have to pay if I work in Morgantown? I live in Clay County, and you know, why, that's not fair. And so their base is saying, get rid of the user fee, get rid of those 1% sales tax, and the 6 to 10 cities in West Virginia above 15,000, you know, get hurt.
You know, it's interesting, the original title of that, not the service fee, I don't recall the exact wording, but it was, I think, the Safe Communities.
Streets and communities, something.
Safe Streets and Communities, yes. So it really was about that. My compliments to Chief Engineer Davis in 2016. I asked where that money was going to. He immediately put it into ADA ramps, which was very beneficial. And he wound up putting a lot into the paving plan, which really paid off for a lot of people. They're seeing work being done around Morgantown to make their drive safe, but it's a tough sell with a lot of people. They want to drive, and they want their streets to take priority, the surface streets for driving to take priority of walking. So it really is been a long time effort to try to get through to people, although we're lucky here in Morgantown. We have a lot of walkers, a lot of bicyclists. So Mr. Gatlin and city engineering has a tough time, and city council as well, trying to decide, you know, how to apply these funds. But I think with this new plan here, the design does come into a large play with it, particularly when it comes to cooperation with the Division of Highways. As we know, our streets are split up with a lot of that.
Yeah, so I was not told to present to you all funding mechanisms.
Okay,
If you would
yeah,
like,
sure.
if you would, you know, as a traffic commissioner, right, and as a city, you know, councilor, if you would like that to be included, you know, definitely let me know.
Well, I don't want to burden you with more than, but, you know, just some ideas would be wonderful, just to get us thinking and talking and exploring.
Sure, I'd be happy to talk to administration to see if they think that's appropriate, you know, and
Yeah.
And
include a few slides on that.
There are different cities that, you know, with interesting funding mechanisms as well that the PED board has looked at over many years.
Great.
There's just very few things that are legal for the cities in West Virginia to actually do for revenue generation. So we have this list, right? PED board said 25% for reassessment. Make sure the plan's good. Make sure that we have a good list of projects, and I fleshed out that a little bit, right? And then 25% for design of complicated projects for maybe the next 6 months, and then, you know, following years, right? Every year we have 25%, and then 50%. Drew and engineering department, you all been making good decisions about random sidewalk investments because the plan is not providing us with really good top recommendations. We trust for you to make, you know, executive decisions about recommendations for the first couple years. And the PED board said, just come to the traffic commission with a list of what you think is good. And this is my list of significantly more than $1 million worth of projects. But we haven't vetted any of these with neighborhoods yet. But I really, you know, most of these things are attempting to address neighborhood requests. They, you know, some of them are from the plan, and some of them are high priority in the plan, the Alta plan. Some of them are gaps that I've noticed that I think are incredibly important. And yeah, so the three main projects that I would say that if we wanted to do new sidewalks, closing gaps, really effective capital investments, I would say Monongalia Avenue from essentially Richwood to Willie Street. There's only a handful of sidewalks there, but that is a big corridor, you know, that is just not, yeah, there's no good. It's very busy on a road from a transport or motor vehicle standpoint, and it would connect Woodburn to downtown, right? And then also Woodburn to University, the old University High School, the middle school area, right? The other one would be essentially connecting the existing sidewalk on Grand Street at the very top of the hill. It doesn't quite reach to the top of the hill. It stops at Gordon, and connecting that all the way down to Dorsey. That's been, you know, that whole corridor has been a problem corridor for a long time. A lot of traffic calming requests there, and so sidewalk investments there could help with that. We would, at the same time that we're building sidewalks, we can redo, you know, curb lines, right? You know, do a little bit of what we did the experiment on, and provide some of the bump outs here and there, right? And make a nice, you know.
I think it's narrow up there as it comes down to Dorsey, so
It
if we can
does.
figure out a way to sidewalk it, that would be great.
It does, yeah. It's. I don't think shared infrastructure is going to be an option there, right? You know, so definitely having exclusive space for pedestrians, you know, versus having them walk on the side of the road, you know, I think is a very good.
And let's
investment.
see, wouldn't that item coincide with the Safe Streets for All grant application? Mr. Austin spoke about some Dorsey Avenue improvements.
So yeah, the very end of that, right? The Ross, Grand, Teresa, Dobbs Street intersection, pardon me, the Ross, Dorsey, Teresa, Dobbs Street intersection is a big issue. It's a big source of the speeding traffic up into Second Ward, right? And the Safe Streets for All grant, the $4.2 or $4.6 million of projects that we submitted to the MPO for inclusion in that grant include a redesign of that intersection as well as a side path along Dorsey, connecting essentially where the sidewalk ends on Dorsey all the way to Greenbag Road, and then tying into the side path that is going to be hopefully designed with the Greenbag Road improvements, which are design monies have been already allocated for. Also, in that Safe Streets for All grant application, we allocated for a redesign of the South High Street and Dorsey intersection, which is a very problematic intersection, and then also the Wagner and Dorsey intersection. And then a variety of different rectangular rapid flashing beacon crossings on Dorsey to help people kind of move from different areas of interest. I mean, that is probably the most significant connection that I can imagine building in the city at this point, except for maybe the 705's, you know, multi-use path, which is just it's outside of the city limits, so we can't really
Right.
do it. But from a regional standpoint, very, very effective and good.
With all of this, did all of the sidewalk stuff from spring and summer, is that sort of part of this, or was that a whole completely different thing?
Sidewalk stuff from spring and summer, can you elaborate?
Like, I mean, they redid, not new sidewalks, but repaired existing sidewalks, all, seems like it was mostly all along Route 7.
Mm-hmm.
And Burroughs
Yeah.
and Willie Street. Yeah, so that was the Department of Highways
Okay.
doing what they are legally required to do for ADA ramps to upgrade before they pave. And so they are planning to resurface Brockway and Powell Avenue, the whole way between at least Deckers Creek Boulevard and basically University Avenue.
Okay.
Right? And then they're also planning to resurface Willie Street the entire length, and they're planning to resurface Burroughs Street the entire length. They're also planning to resurface part of Holland Avenue. You may have heard some of the discussions with Westover and their plans over there. And then Route 100 and several others.
So that,
That's DOH.
okay, so completely
Yep.
separate from,
Yep.
all right, thank you.
Mhm.
But that's what's good about this plan. Mr. Gatlin does have oversight on how to, coordinate with DOH. So we do develop that connecting network of sidewalks. It's a comprehensive approach, which I think for the money is very valuable in targeting, how to appropriate the funds.
Mhm. The Ross Grand sidewalk would dead end into the Dorsey improvements that we're hoping to make, which would then also complement one of the Paper Street projects that we have there behind the dead ends of Avalon and Parkway and Phillip that are near Marjorie Gardens. There's some at the end of here, right? Along Dorsey Lane from School Bus Drive to future side path along Dorsey Avenue, along Avalon from Dorsey Lane to future Paper Street connector, right? So those are really just, making sure that the high population centers there do have access to these
Would
future
it connect to the school?
projects. Yeah, so one of the crossings that we have in Safe Streets for All goes directly across Phillip Street, or across Dorsey at Phillip, which is a straight shot into the school access road. So rather than making pedestrians jog down Dorsey, so that's two, right? So we've got Monongalia Avenue, and then we have the Ross Grand corridor, and then the third major one would be connecting the gaps on Richwood Avenue, and so that would be connecting essentially Jerome Park to Woodburn, and therefore to downtown. And then conversely connecting Woodburn to Saberton via the existing pedestrian networks that you'd pick up near Darst Street. There's improvements that are really needed to finish those connections to Saberton, but those are very highly dependent upon DOH cooperation. Fortunately, Donna Hardy and the district or the central planning and safety office, they are very keyed into pedestrian safety here in Morgantown right now and are helping to push along some good projects on state routes, one of which would be there at Mineral and Powell Avenue, near where you spend a lot of your days, right?
Yeah.
And redoing potentially that entire intersection. We submitted a TAC grant actually to even relocate Mineral and Deckers Creek Boulevard to make that a T intersection if we possibly could, which is a huge project for sure.
Oh, wow.
That's beyond the scope of Donna's work, but she's looking at sidewalks and lower stress crossings in the meantime there. So yeah, those are the three major connectors that I think would be, good high priorities. We don't necessarily have to do all of them. Some of them are technically difficult, right? Like Monongalia Avenue, where it comes into Richwood. Very steep banks on either side of it. Going to be a tough sidewalk to build. Maybe that's not the very first thing we try. But certainly, connecting the rest of Mon Avenue all the way up to Willie Street, I think is pretty straightforward. There's a couple retaining walls that need to be happening there. Other smaller ones that are also very consequential would be on Oakland Street from West Everly to McDonald's. We're talking about 100 feet of sidewalk here. But man, just it's a gap from an accessibility standpoint. It's a gap from a stress standpoint between just extremely high density pedestrian movements and just closing that gap with a tiny little connector, right? It's amazing that we haven't done that yet. But yeah, so that's $45,000 drop in the bucket of a $100 million plan, right? But very important. And then after we build the sidewalk on North Street, right, we're widening north. I said it was going to happen this year. I guess it's not happening this year, hopefully next year. Anyway, as that design is bid out and as we put that sidewalk on North Street, that project connects on Grove from north to Willowdale, but it doesn't connect the rest of Grove to the rest of the sidewalk network towards downtown. So, just making sure to not leave another gap there with that North Street widening project and completing that Grove Street connection all the way to Highland and Jones area for Wiles Hill neighborhood. We want to give every neighborhood some love, of course, and things to be proud of and excited about. Sidewalks are very expensive though, and so, what we're talking about, those 4 projects I listed, they're already in excess of $1.5 million. And if we only have $1 million per year to spend, then we're basically going to be doing like one major sidewalk, per year, with $500,000, potentially, or $750 or so $1,000, because we still need to have our design money set aside, right? My recommendation is, if y'all want to make a huge impact to start out, spend all of those ARPA dollars on sidewalks right now. And we could make a huge jump start on this project. And we would also then have plenty of grant application fodder for narratives of how we're connecting and expanding, federal dollars, to leverage other federal dollars and all of this. Otherwise, we're gonna have to get really creative with the funding, for sure.
So right now, the recommendation would be use ARPA funds for $1 million a year, basically.
I think those ARPA funds have to be spent by like 25,
Sure.
or they have to be allocated. So give me all $5.5 million, and I will spend them like
2
now.
years, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's not gonna happen.
That's my recommendation. That's my recommendation. Yeah.
And those are one-time funds, so, we'll need to figure out funding beyond
Sure.
the
Certainly.
11 million that's coming in.
Yeah, for sure. It's important to start off with a bang, I think, a project like this and making everybody proud of the momentum and having things to point to that they can see in their own neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to do that with $500,000 a year or even $750,000 a year to start out with. If we had a huge influx of cash at the beginning, we could truly do a project, I think, in every single neighborhood that would be impactful, for sure. So,
Well, it's a good idea to try to touch each neighborhood to show the impact to each ward.
right.
And, with the second installment of ARPA funds, which will be approximately $1 million, we still have the ability to earmark where that's going to go. Obviously, there's a lot of need for a lot of areas, but this is an important one that I know other city councilors feel is important too. So I think your proposal will be well accepted.
Yeah.
And as you say, Dave, my compliments on Damon and Drew and the Public Works. We had a sidewalk installed on Baldwin Street over in Suncrest that connects a school, a lot of apartments, a lot of WVU students walking along that. That's been a really big plus for Suncrest area. Evansdale's got the 8th Street sidewalk. So I think they're doing a good job allocating around the city, where to put the funds and build the new stuff. So. And DOH as well, as you mentioned, Tony, down there on Brockway Avenue, that's been a horrible sidewalk over as you cross Walnut Street Bridge for years, and it's done now. So thanks to the DOH as well for getting on it. It really does provide a great profile for the city and give a good feeling to walkers that the attention is there, the sidewalks are safer, and you're really not risking injury walking on a sidewalk, which should be a priority.
Yeah, definitely. When I say that I would like to redo the assessment, and like really drill down into existing conditions in the city on sidewalks, there are companies that will go out there, the same people that took care of kind of like shaving off, right? So milling the sidewalk on High Street recently, all the trip hazards over there. They have, and there's a lot of companies like them that have methods to really systematically review every single sidewalk in a city, and then quantitatively, describe hazards, right? And I would want to make sure that we are looking at drainage concerns too, right? For icing and freezing, we have a lot of falls, slips and falls that result in pet injuries in the winter, due to our steep topography and all of that, and obstacles like utility poles, right, in the middle of sidewalks, right? Making sure that we know exactly where every one of those obstacles is, and having a good idea of that.
Any other questions for Mr. Gatlin with this presentation here? So as you can see, it's a pretty extensive consideration for the whole funding issue, liability issue. Someone falls, is a property owner liable? It's really a convoluted sort of code at this point, but my compliments with what they are able to achieve at this point. I think the new proposal will allow them to get a little bit better targeting on it. We are not neglecting the Alta plan at all, but within the city jurisdiction, Mr. Gatlin has some really good oversight on, as he said, how to connect the gaps, how to use the funds and target them appropriately. One thing I would mention that I believe a few years ago, the city did pass an ordinance that if any utility comes in and has to tear up a new sidewalk, they will actually pay for the rebuilding of that sidewalk. You remember that day? That's in place now. I think that was a good thing that was voted on by city council 3-4 years ago. So that's happened a lot in town. But now that sort of puts a little bit more emphasis on planning, as Mr. Gatlin stated, and some oversight. So, Mr. Gatlin, would it help for the traffic commission to give a recommendation on a percentage breakdown, or how would you approach at this point? How can the traffic commission help city council?
I think just presenting what Drew has, really, and then if we personally have any input, if you want to attend the meeting and provide from your own ward, your opinion on some of these projects, that would certainly be valuable.
And certainly, if you want me to talk to your ward about any, good strategic investments that you think would be most meaningful to the people that live where you are, and if they agree with some of these projects, then please let me know. I could definitely use your help in reaching out to the wards. So,
And these investments will be long-term investments with the concrete. I mean, it won't last as long as the Romans, but it will serve the public for a long time. I just saw something on Roman concrete the other day, pretty impressive. And coordinating with the Division of Highways, as we know, they've been very cooperative with pedestrian improvements. Laurel Street crossing over Patterson Drive will be coming soon. They have designs for that. That's a big plus for not only the Suncrest community, but WVU students as well. We thank WVU for helping out with some of the funding on the rapid flashing beacons on University Avenue. So WVU is also attending the meetings and providing some funding and input on the designs. So we have everybody working on this at this point: MPO, County Commission, WVU, City of Morgantown. We're very lucky here in Morgantown to have some good thoughts going into how to keep the community together, because we got a lot of people here, a lot of people moving around. We're one of the highest ones in the nation when it comes to percentage of people who walk and bike. A lot of people wouldn't think that, but it is a fact. So thanks to everyone for that. If you want to attend that meeting, look for the agenda on the city website. That would probably be the committee of the whole. Is that the plan? 26th?
I don't know.
Last Tuesday of the month, so
Okay.
somebody has a calendar.
Okay, so no other questions for Mr. Gatlin. Thank you for that presentation. My personal
Yep.
Gratitude from the Pedestrian Safety Board on that, and we will do what we can to help move this forward in the best way and safest way possible. All right, end of the meeting here. Let's proceed with the commissioner comments. William?
I have two. I've had major complaints about the curbs at the top of 8th Street and the curb at Falling Run and Hoffman at the top of the hill there. There have been quite a few blown tires as they've come around and hit those curbs.
Okay, thank you.
Chip?
Oh, fine.
Martin?
The sidewalk sounds exciting, it does. And you mentioned that you haven't vetted with the neighborhoods. But I think the two big hills you gotta climb, or one, those laws are gonna have to change, because if you came up to a homeowner and said, I'm gonna put a sidewalk in front of your house, and from here on, you're gonna be responsible for it, that's a tough sell. And then the other thing is that, like a levy for sidewalks might be a tough sell as well, because I like sidewalks, I do, but I don't drive on sidewalks, I drive on the roads, and I think more people would rather have better roads, less potholes, than sidewalks. I think it's a great idea if we can get it to work, if we can find that balance. And then I mentioned this earlier, but if you're gonna put sidewalks in, it would be really helpful to, when you do the design, recognize there's telephone poles in the middle of the sidewalk and move them. That's it.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Martin. Excellent observations. Tony?
I have two. Number one, I think the sidewalk are a fabulous idea. I can tell you when I go in other places, I always run. I mean, I'm a runner. And the thing that I always notice is, man, this is a great town to run in because it's got great sidewalks. Or, my gosh, I got a hard time running when I go to Virginia Tech, right? Because there's no stinking sidewalks anywhere and I take my life in my hands. So I think that it's good value for the city, and people coming in recognize it, and the people that are here recognize it. And then secondly, I have one complaint, but it might be the form you were talking about. It's a vision thing, where you're pulling out from Grandview to turn onto Grand. There's a bus stop there, and the tree kind of overhangs, and you can't see what's coming up the hill. I don't know if that's something I do online on that form you were talking about, or if I tell you here, but.
Thank you for that input. Brendan?
I have just an observation on the sidewalk plan, actually more of a question. Drew, do y'all plan on going to neighborhood associations and pitching these sidewalks, or is it just soliciting input on which projects to go into those neighborhoods?
I don't know,
Okay.
but I am open to suggestions.
I think it's an observation. I mean, there's kind of two parts to this. If it's council's asking for guidance and recommendations on how to go forward with sidewalks and how to spend ARPA money, that might be time of the essence, and so might have enough time to get some meaningful input other than saying, hey, this is coming down the pike to neighborhood associations, but also would want to have a point where they could have some meaningful discussion or identification of sidewalk plans or projects that are meaningful to those communities. So I think as far as this plan goes, and get from council, the observation would be maybe hold off and talk to neighborhoods. This is just a plan for council to act, and then going forward with any type of decisions being made, let's solicit some input from our neighborhoods themselves. So having presentations or talking at neighborhood associations. So.
Nick?
Would you mind, I guess, kind of clarifying that for a moment? So, like, given that time is of the essence, you recommend maybe presenting to council and kind of reformulating the recommendation to council that they maybe arrive on some sort of funding commitment and maybe a more generalized list of projects, and then bringing it, after that we know what pot we have, then bringing kind of more refined decisions to neighborhoods to try to then prioritize afterwards.
So I think if time is of the essence and council wants something to act on quickly, is to use the Alta plan on what's available, and then having a more strategic to fill those gaps by actually going in later and talking to the communities themselves and soliciting input on projects that the Alta plan might have missed or that are very meaningful to those communities. So act now with council, time of the essence, Alta plan, later going to the neighborhood associations and saying, can you all identify projects?
Mhm. Yeah, so just to break the procedure here, the Alta plan basically
We don't have
said-
the answer, it's just an observation. So,
yeah. I think it's just important for you all to know. The Alta plan basically had us replacing every single sidewalk on Frat Hill for 2 years, for the very first 2 years. And I didn't think that was gonna be going over very well with any decision maker or anybody in the city in general. Those are some of the certainly heaviest used sidewalks. They're very important sidewalks, but they're already being used. They're already serving a population that can sort of tolerate the condition that they're in. They're accessible enough. They don't present a huge gap. They're not really connecting any neighborhoods. They're not serving a much larger sort of connectivity thing. If we're trying to improve and increase the number of pedestrians that are on the road and build support for a program, like, I strongly recommend we do not follow the priorities that were given to us by the Alta plan. Yeah, and so that's basically what I told the PED board and what I have told, what I'm trying to, tell you all is like the recommendations that they gave us are not good. Like, they don't make any sense from a larger standpoint. So, but I appreciate the observation, or I guess the comment, so.
Yeah, thank you, Brandon.
Hmm?
Dave?
I think the approach that this city has done with paving streets, I don't think there was like a real new plan on which ones needed it, but it was done, and we got 11 miles done this year, and that's the most we've done, I think, ever in 1 year, and that's awesome. So I think just creating some action will create excitement. In my own personal opinion, if we can also look at connectors to the rail trail that don't exist, and for example, in my ward, there's only one sidewalk anywhere around Morella Park, and it's from the upper ball field, well, more like where the playground starts, below the upper ball field to the pool. But there's nothing that goes around the tennis courts, the lower ball field, or coming down the hill, and there's nothing going across the subterranean bridge and then along the street parking on the old Route 7 and that goes up to the trailhead. So creating just more safe connectors with sidewalks to the rail trail, I think creates value to the neighborhoods.
All right, thank you, Dave. I'll just wrap up. Thank you for the discussion on pedestrian infrastructure. For many decades, the petroleum industry has tried to get people in cars and off afoot, but hopefully that cycle is coming back around to people walking, biking. This town of Morgantown offers a great opportunity for that. So let's all work together to try to get that shift going and provide safe infrastructure. Of course, that comes down to educating drivers and walkers on that. Thank you for the input that you've given historically, Tony, on the problem with all pedestrian rules, regulations, driver rules, regulations, paying attention. It all is takes attention, and certainly appreciate you continuing to ring that bell, particularly from the outside perspective as a city traveler. Thank you for that. The only other thing I will say regarding the new agenda formats, thank you for Martin for your agenda proposals in time. Right now, I wanted to go ahead and solidify the bylaws, and next meeting, I would like to approach the procedural guidelines as I stated, so that we can decide how we're going to talk about what we're talking about. Again, there's procedural guidelines for submission, evaluations, recommendations, implementations. I think that will help the process go along so that we can follow up on some discussions that we've had regarding what we choose to talk about. That's still sort of an issue now that we can decide upon, but I will do my best as regulated in the last meeting to form the agenda and include everybody in that and find out what we should be talking about and how we can help out the Public Works Department, City Council, and the City of Morgantown to make our communities safer. That's all I've got. Motion to adjourn?
I believe that I am considered a commissioner with all rights,
Oh, very good. Yeah, take the floor.
except for voting.
Okay.
So just, that's been an awkward thing. I don't know if that means that I can move on things or not, but I have never moved here because it seems like moving is voting, or it's part of the voting process. So it would be interesting to get clarification on that. But there's always this awkward dance where I'm like suggesting that you all might consider thinking about potentially something, move on something, right? And if I could just move, then it might be a little bit easier for us to communicate. I don't know. Anyhow, Martin, I got your email. Thank you for your email, for your explicit request for those stuff. Sorry I did not have it ready for this month, but definitely working with other departments to get it ready. We are switching our request partner form and we're moving to a new system. I mentioned it last month, C-Click Fix. It was supposed to be rolled out like over the past few days, and I don't think the public rollout has begun yet. But anyway, we're having a new system, and we'll be able to generate that kind of statistics that you're looking for. Haven't worked with the police department yet about crash reports, but we'll see. Anyway, I appreciate the request. And the safety walk, yeah, I encourage you all to attend those. Let me know. I'll try to link you up there. And I appreciate you attending tonight, navigating the parade, and I appreciate working with you all. Thank you so much.
Will you be sending out information on the meeting place for the safety walk, or should I inquire to?
I will.
Very good, thank you. Okay, Dave, hope to see you there.
Yeah.
All right, motion to adjourn?
So-
Tony, second?
Second.
Dave, anybody opposed? Very good. Meeting adjourned.